Certain souls go through time and into eternity not alone. They are given charismata which draw other souls, and they become living magnets. How is it that the very young Bernard of Dijon entered the new monastery of Citeaux not alone, but with a large number of companions? He was a magnet, and he was going to be a magnet throughout life and indeed beyond life. St. Robert, Abbot of Malem, had founded the Novum Monasterium at Citeaux, but was missed by his own brethren, and he was recalled after the foundation to Malem, where he was rightfully abbot. But his successor, Alberic, was also a saint, and so was his own successor, an Englishman, Stephen Harding. And so the first three superiors of the new monastery were high voltage. And indeed it was under St. Stephen that the by then growing monastery and community, and indeed family, found it necessary to have a Magna Carta. And by the time of St. Stephen, the third abbot of Citeaux, there were so many monasteries that they had to unite them with this bond of charity. It was called the Chart of Charity, Carta Caritatis, la Charte de la Charité, and it was something which bound the whole growing family of Cistercians into one common bond which would make them do the same thing all over the Cistercian world and have the same spirit. The usages would be the same, even the constructions would be similar, the pattern of the Cistercian monastery physically. And wherever one went in the Cistercian world, one found the same life. And they were very much acting as one huge army. The unity and the discipline were maintained by the regular general chapters held initially at Citeaux itself, and the visitations. A founding abbot would be the father immediate of the daughter house, and on it would go, and that is actually still the pattern to this day. The impetus increased greatly when the very young St. Bernard was made the first abbot of the daughter house of Clairvaux, Chiaravalle. And when he went there, it was in the fullness of this new foundation, this new spirit, of fidelity to the rule of St. Benedict ad litteram, literally, that the thrust would be such that with the magnet of the likes of St. Bernard himself, giving good chapters, good teaching, good homilies, many of which we can still read, the order grew very quickly. It was from this daughter house, Clairvaux, that many foundations came. One very near here, Mellifont. He is referred to as the mellifluous doctor, Doctor mellifluous, flowing with honey, because of his poetic speech and writing. The bard of our Blessed Lady par excellence. And he sent a colony to this area, and Mellifont was founded at the request of the primate of all Ireland, St. Malachy, the Archbishop of Armagh, who was a personal friend of Bernard. And indeed, he died on the way to Rome at Citeaux, or rather at Clairvaux, and it was St. Bernard who pronounced his funeral oration. and he himself died not long afterwards, and they were buried one next to the other at the altar of the Abbey Church. But by then, the foundation had already been made. He had sent this colony, and it was as near as possible to that foundation that the Cistercians of today made a foundation, New Mellifont, also very close to here. And that was made from Mount Melleray, which was made from Le Melleray in France, which also made New Melleray in America. And from Mount Melleray came Roscrea, Nunraw, Tarawara. Well, that came from Roscrea. And from Mount Melleray came the English house of Mount St. Bernard. And from there came a house in Africa, and on it would go. They also made a foundation in New Zealand from that house, and so this family tree pattern carries on. The Cistercians are still able to found. Indeed, Citeaux, near Paris-le-Monial, they have made a foundation in the Czech Republic, which is now an independent abbey, and they are about 90 in number. In Victoriano, the nuns in Italy, they are also about 90 in number, and they periodically make new foundations. So where there is fervour, the pattern still emerges, like bees going out of the hive to found as a group and taking the spirit with them. St. Bernard himself was a great contemplative. He had a whole mystical trait. He had this devotion to Our Blessed Lady, and there is a story that one time he was passing a statue of Our Blessed Lady and said, Ave Maria, and the statue answered, Ave Bernarde. He, because of his talents, was also obliged to obey church authority and to help with very difficult church situations at the time. There was great tension in the air, and there were also problems with regard to the Holy Land, and he preached the crusade. And he therefore was called away from his monastery quite a lot. And despite all his cares, he always was a contemplative. And he would have this custom when he was going from the cloister to the abbey church to take the holy water, at the holy water stoop there just at the beginning of that sector which belonged entirely to heaven, the abbey church itself, and to say to his problems, stay here, I'll take you up again upon coming out. Restez ici, je vous reprendrai en sortant. And so when he was there, he was able to enter into mode. And there is a story that he was able to see sometimes things in there, for instance, angels. And he would perhaps see that the angels of some of the brethren had a lot to carry up in prayer, others far less, and some not at all because they were too distracted. And so he was very much aware of the importance of being what one was. And he was also given to understand that at certain points, like the Te Deum, it was necessary that all the attention of the monks be given to what they were pronouncing, because that was a very high praise. Little things like that were given to him, which were handed on within the Cistercian family. It is felt to be very much a heritage, a family with heirlooms. But remember at La Trappe, we were unaware of it. There was this only portrait that exists of the abbey, the reforming abbey of La Trappe, Abbé de Rancé, and it was taken rather stealthily by somebody who, for some excuse, was able to get close to him and was able to put the face there, and we have it there, and that's what he looked like. But we know also many things about him. In fact, when I was at there, we were given lectures by Don Lucien, who was an expert on l'Abbé de Rancé, probably the world expert. He'd read all his work, and he knew exactly how he thought and how his spirit worked, and he was able to transmit that spirit to us. I remember writing a billet to him one time saying, "Vous m'avez donné la vocation, you gave me the vocation." It was something that he actually was able to transmit as, and he put it this way, c'est un tout qui tient, it's a whole that holds together. The whole corpus writes and is something which portrays what the dynamic of the monastic life is, coming straight from the desert really. It was absolute. L'absolu était un caractère de la trappe, he said. And this was the heritage that we had. And he also transmitted the fact that this abbot was very much loved by his brethren, despite his great austerity. He used to die quite young quite often because the penance was such, but he had this magnetism like Bernard. He was able to draw and keep. They bonded with him. He was always there, of course. That's important for an abbot, always with his brethren. St. Bernard sent other colonies. One was to England. The first house in England was Waverley in the south of England. That founded others. And then the first house in Wales was Hen-dy-Gwynardav, Whitland. And the nuns are in that area now. And it's not too far from Cordy, where they're also Trappist monks. Now, in England, they had their own Cistercian heritage, and they had the likes of Abbot Aelred, Abbot of Rivaux, who had a sister who was a recluse, and he wrote a rule for recluses, which was very much followed in the Middle Ages. And he was known as the Good Abbot. His monastery was full, always full. He used to take all souls that came and take them in, despite their spiritual infirmities. It was a place for all to be healed. But he loved them all, and he had this doctrine of spiritual friendship. He wrote about it. The whole doctrine, which is worth knowing and keeping, because one loves in the monastery. The Cistercian monastery especially is made of love. The Magna Carta was that. The Charter of Charity. And it matters because the Cistercians traditionally do all together. Dormitory and refectory and scriptorium, without individual cells, and therefore charity must reign. It's a cushion in which one is bathed, the atmosphere, divine and human intertwined. And the solitude there was made of 2 degrees. That of the monastery itself, very much separated from the world physically, and that of the soul, even separated from its brethren by an invisible wall, that of complete and absolute perpetual silence, impenetrable. Therefore, hidden under the hood, one was known only to God. But La Trappe didn't even know the surnames of the brethren. And so, their past was quite unknown. Brother knows not the heart of brother. And it's a great safeguard because the past then remains in the past. One doesn't talk at all. And therefore the past is forgotten. It doesn't need to be brought back because it makes us go back to the past. And also all the occasions of sin are gone because most of the sins come from the mouth in the monastic life if one has recreations and talks. And the monastic work is a continuation then of the choir. There's no division. It's one straight line, contemplation in different forms. The work, when it's simple, allows the mind to be free and can pray quietly on and on, as on Mount Athos. In the east, they have the Jesus prayer. In the west, we can have the rosary going on. Many souls can be saved. And Thomas Merton, a great Trappist, has much teaching about this. He was raised up in our time. In fact, his vocation was quite strange. He didn't know where to go. He thought of the Franciscans, thought of many things, but then he asked for a word, and he opened Scripture, and it came, this word was what caught his eye. He opened it, put his finger on it, and it was, "You will be silent." It was what the angel said to Zechariah in the temple. And he was silent, but the abbot, James Fox, saw that he had a talent and allowed him to write, and he wrote Seven Storey Mountain, which in English in England came through as Elected Silence, actually which had an influence on me when I was young. It's a powerful book, and it shows the spirit, the true spirit of Cistercian fervour. It's a beautiful way, it works, but it has to be kept and not meddled with, because if it becomes just a place to talk and bring the world in, there's no point. And we see the pattern that the houses which keep the true tradition also keep the vocations and draw others. The Lord sends them where they will be with Him and not wasting time. Because the gamble, the contemplative life is a great gamble. If one doesn't play the game fully, one will lose the game. One has to be experts in defeating Satan, and he wants to make them weak by bringing in the world and noise and talking, so as to make them useless for what they're there for. If it is taken on board totally, with that adventure of hiddenness in God until death, it works. It's a great freeing factor, and much prayer is generated for the whole church, and penance. If it is watered down, then we see the consequences, and old Nick knows that. I often think about those wonderful times, and I sometimes regret that I didn't listen too much, because when we're young we know it all, don't we? Oscar Wilde says, I'm not young enough to know everything. If only I had listened. This morning, thinking about those wonderful times at La Trappe, I wrote this with a twinge of nostalgia. Ma chère Trappe, there was a time when time was very long, when time had time to be and to be known. There was an hour that did to ours belong, not made of haste, but of high waste, our own, upon a madness spent, a madness bent on conquering the skies. There was, I say, a place, a trace of providence once lent, where nonsense tucked the soul far, far away. I cannot be again what once I was. I cannot tread the cloisters of my youth, or hear the scent that arch and window has singed ever on my soul. And this sealed mouth, preserved from leakage well, must now tell all to all and sundry that may bear